What happens when a homeless black teenager spends his last $3 just to sing in a room that never wanted him there? The administrator tried to drag him off stage, but the woman in pearls broke into tears. What followed left even the skeptics speechless. Let's be real from the jump. Elias didn't have a damn thing. No house, no mother waiting on some back porch with warm cornbread, no worn-out uncle giving him street wisdom over a cigarette. He didn't even have a decent pair of socks. What he had, what he clung to like a man hanging off a cliff by one fingernail, was a voice and $3. Three crumpled bills that wouldn't even get you a bowl of chili at a halfway clean diner. But there he stood, outside the polished glass doors of the Welton Theater, gripping those bills like they were the key to a future he'd never been invited to imagine. The boy looked like life had picked a fight with him the day he was born and kept swinging ever since. Hollow cheeks, cracked lips, dark circles under his eyes like ink stains that refused to fade. His jacket was too big, obviously someone else's before it got to him, and his sneakers. Let's just say they had more stories than soul. But still, he stood tall, like someone who had already lost everything and figured, what else are they going to take from me? He was one of those black kids that white folks pretend they don't see on the street until he opens his mouth. Then suddenly everybody remembers they have ears and hearts, whether they want to or not. In his hand, Elias clutched a torn piece of paper. Not some glossy flyer with fancy fonts. Nah, this was handwritten with a black marker and taped to the side of a liquor store. Auditions, Welton Theater, 5 p.m., ages 12 to 18, $3 fee. No phone number, no website, just a time and a place. Like the world had dropped a golden key in the middle of the sidewalk and dared him to pick it up. And what does a homeless black boy do when the world offers a door like that? He walks through it. Yes, Lord, he walks, not because he's welcome, but because he ain't got a thing to lose. Now, the Welton Theater ain't just any building, it's a monument. White columns, polished floors, gold trim that screams old money, the kind of place where the air smells like perfume and politics, the kind of place where culture wears pearls and side-eyes anyone who doesn't match the carpet. It looked more like a church for the rich than a space for art. You don't walk into the Welton unless someone told you you're allowed to. And Elias? No one told him that, but he came anyway. The guard at the door had the posture of someone who thought his job required a badge and a gun. Big guy, with a face like sour milk, all scrunched and suspicious. He looked Elias up and down, then tilted his head like he was staring at something stuck to his shoe. You with a group? He muttered, already annoyed. Number just me, Elias said, holding out his $3. Last he had. This ain't karaoke night, the guard scoffed. We got real talent in there. You even got a place to sleep tonight? Elias met his gaze. Calm, unblinking. No stuttering, no shame. Just steel. Not right now, he said, but I can sing. And for one tiny second, something in the guard's face twitched. Regret? Pity? Recognition? Who knows? He paused, then waved him in with a grunt, like it hurt to do it. Go, just keep quiet. Don't try to get cute. Inside, the place was already buzzing. Dozens of well-dressed kids and their even better-dressed parents. Moms flipping through portfolios, dads on Bluetooth headsets barking at assistants, kids in expensive loafers, hair freshly done, clutching folders labeled audition materials. Elias stepped to the side, shrinking into the wall, trying to become invisible. But invisibility don't work when you're the only one with calloused hands and thrift store shoes. They saw him. Oh, they saw him. Some kids whispered. A few laughed. One kid pointed like Elias was some sort of exhibit. Look, Ma, a stray. That's how it is, isn't it? You can survive 100 nights in the cold, but nothing freezes your chest like a room full of people who already decided you're beneath them. He found a seat in the corner, waited, prayed. When they called his name, the room shifted. Heads turned. The energy changed. You could feel it, that sharp crackle when expectations are about to be challenged. Elias stepped on stage. No backtrack, no mic check, no stylist fixing his collar, just him in the heat of 100 stares. You working with a coach? asked one of the judges, an older man in glasses who looked like he ran background checks for a hobby. No, Elias answered. Where's your guardian? Asked the woman in pearls. Mid-60s, her expression tight enough to snap. Don't have one. She squinted, annoyed now. How old are you? 15. And you're here alone? Yes, ma'am. She scribbled something in her notebook, lips pressed like she'd just tasted something bitter. Fine, she said. Sing, quickly. He nodded, took a deep breath, and then he sang. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't what these judges were used to. No runs, no riffs, no pop star acrobatics. Just his voice, raw and open. And the story it carried, it hit like thunder. He sang about his mother, about a system that let her die, about sleeping with one eye open in shelters where hope is rationed, about loneliness so thick it became a second skin, and about the dream, the only thing that ever made him feel real. He didn't sing to impress, he sang to survive. And the room, silenced, not out of politeness. Number. This was the kind of silence that comes when truth enters uninvited and sits down front row. Then, a sound, a soft sniffle. It was her, the Pearl Lady. She turned away fast, like she didn't want anyone to see the tear that had slipped down her cheek. But before the moment could settle, chaos kicked in. The side door slammed open. A man in a tight gray suit stormed in like he was chasing a thief. The administrator, tall, pale, tie knotted like a noose. Who let this boy on stage? But he barked. He's not on the list. Judges turned. The crowd murmured. The magic shattered. I'm sorry, but this is a closed audition, the man continued. He's not registered. He doesn't belong here. The judge in glasses stood. Is that true? I paid, Elias said quietly. At the door. That's not protocol, snapped the administrator. We have procedures. Procedures? Muttered the woman in pearls, barely audible. He just made me cry. That doesn't change policy, the man barked. We have sponsors, expectations. We can't allow just anyone off the street. He froze, caught himself. But it was too late. The words had been said. Off the street. There it was. The truth behind the rules. Elias just stood there, breathing hard. Not because he was scared, but because he'd been here before. Not in this building, but in this moment. Where being talented wasn't enough. Where being good wasn't enough. Where being black and broke meant the rules were written in invisible ink. But this time, the crowd started shifting. Someone stood, then another. Applause began. Slow at first, then growing like a wave. One voice shouted, "Let him finish!" Another, "He earned it!" The administrator turned red. He stormed forward, reached for Elias's arm. "Time to go," he hissed. And the boy, he didn't resist. Because he knew, in this world, if you're black and poor, you're always not on the list. What happened next changed everything. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss how this story turns around. They led him down that narrow hallway like he was a criminal. Not a kid who just bared his soul in song. Not a kid who'd poured every drop of heartbreak and hope into those notes. Like he'd crashed someone's wedding in someone else's tux instead of merely singing the truth he carried in his veins. The administrator had Elias by the arm so hard it was as if he was squeezing the last ounce of dignity out of the boy, twisting those wrist words into something ugly and silent. "You don't get it, kid," the man hissed through clenched teeth, voice low but harsh, as though he was trying not to let every person nearby hear how serious he thought this all was. "This isn't a street corner open mic. We've got partners, sponsors, television. We can't have sidewalk amateurs in our theater." From the street, huh? Elias thought, but didn't speak. His silence was sharper than any comeback could have been, because he understood now. They invited him on stage just to show them what a little black kid could do, then planned to push him off stage like trash once he made them feel something real. Not to applaud him, not to support him, to sanitize the problem for camera lenses once their hearts got too heavy. Elias walked in silence, his eyes not calm. They burned. He understood. They let him sing, but not to be heard, to be used, to be shown. and then hidden. Well, no, not on his watch. He wasn't a pawn in their little publicity game. He was a storm, and they hadn't figured that out yet. At the entrance to the backstage area, where black curtains hung heavy and fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a small group of parents and guardians had gathered. The same people who earlier had looked at him like he was a malfunctioning toy, some averting their gazes, others whispering about the kid. But from that crowd, a tall woman stepped forward, dreadlocks cascading down her suit jacket, presence unmistakable. She placed herself squarely in Elias's path. "What are you doing to this boy?" she demanded, not loud, but with that quiet authority that stops a room. "He's not registered," the administrator replied, voice clipped like a 45. "No room for mistake. We're removing him. That's all. There's no need to alarm anyone." "Well, I am alarmed." She crossed her arms, voice steady. "Because if this was a white kid in an oversized blazer, singing a safe song, you'd already be lining up selfies and tweeting, 'Authentic talent discovered.' But this boy sang. He ripped the roof off that auditorium. And you know it." The administrator's face hardened like someone had just dunked a bar of soap in his coffee. He leaned forward, trying to push her aside. "Please step back. This is an internal matter." She drew a press badge from her pocket. Her hand was calm, her gaze steady. "I'm Press, Voice of Harlem. I'm covering this audition live. Hope you don't mind if the camera also catches you forcibly escorting a talented black boy off your stage because he didn't check all your boxes." That hit him like he was punched in the gut. He jerked his hand from Elias's arm, looked at the boy like he was suddenly raw meat in a butcher's window. "Fine," he said, voice tight. "Do whatever you want," and turned away, defeated like a clown whose red nose had lost its color under bright lights. But that wasn't the final act. From behind the woman in pearls, the same judge who earlier looked upon Elias like he was dust on an antique piano, stepped forward into the back hallway. She moved with purpose, as if she was ready to tell them that music isn't sewn into a form, and slid through the keyhole like a pick unlocks injustice. When she reached Elias, she didn't say a word, just stood beside him in that hallway, lit by harsh industrial bulbs. The noise of the crowd dimmed behind them. Finally she spoke, soft but fierce. "When you sang, you reminded me of my grandmother. I heard her voice in your pain. She had dreams, but they never gave her a stage. You gave me back something I forgot. I haven't cried like that in 20 years. Elias froze, heart hammering. He didn't even know what to say. Something inside him cracked open, a shard of hope that maybe, just maybe, all wasn't lost. "I want you to sing again," she said, "right now in front of these cameras." "For who?" he asked, voice small and wary. "For everyone," she said, looked him in the eye. "For everyone who ever thought their voice didn't deserve to be heard." She walked ahead first. Elias followed, hesitant, but something in him told him that if, just if, this was a chance to make them listen, he had to take it. They re-emerged into the stage area. Quiet now, lights lowered, a hush where people had begun filing out but stopped when they saw her. Cameras clicked on. Spotlights blinked on. The hush grew heavier. She approached the mic, fingers steady on the stand. In the hush, she raised her voice. "We made a mistake," she started, looking directly into the lens. "Today, a boy who wasn't on any list stood before you and sang his truth so clearly that I remembered why we do this. Music isn't reserved for the privileged few." She paused. "Fear of breaking format nearly robbed us of something real. And we can't let that happen. Not tonight." She pointed at Elias. He stepped forward. His chest, normally tight, felt spacious in that moment, as though the weight of system-made expectations lifted. Just for long enough that he could breathe again. When he began to sing, it wasn't the same shaky voice from before. There was steel in it now, an edge carved from injustice, shaped by wear, deliberately sharpened by survival. He sang with fury and heartbreak and memories of freezing corners and hospital sirens silencing prayers. He sang about nights so cold he dreamt of wearing hope for warmth, about siding with strangers for coffee change, only to hear them clench their purses when he got close. He sang about his mother's death, Not because she was sick, but because no ambulance came in time. Delayed by 2 hours, they called it, as though it wasn't a death sentence by prejudice. He wasn't singing into a mic. He was singing into every face who doubted him, every system built to keep him out, every person who thought their protocol outranked his humanity. When he finished, there were no immediate cheers, because this wasn't entertainment. This was reckoning. Then, like a dam breaking, voices rose. One shout of, "That's real," broke into applause. Then camera flashes, and soon the unspoken unity of standing ovation. Their hands pounding floors until wood shook. Then the administrator reappeared, but this time the look on his face wasn't anger. It was confusion, like he had woken up halfway through a dream, realizing he missed his cue. His face said, "What did I do?" But nobody was looking anymore. The woman in pearls looked to the camera operator. "Did you get that?" They both nodded fiercely. "Good," she said, "because tomorrow this goes everywhere." Fast forward to the next morning. Social media erupted. Homeless black boy makes judges weep at audition. He wasn't on the list. Then he sang Truth. Videos hit millions of plays. Comments poured in. He reminded me of my nephew. I can't stop crying. Some got nasty, playing on emotions again. But by the time someone wrote criticism, it didn't matter, because now the world had to listen. Later that afternoon, the tall woman with the dreads found Elias in a quiet corner backstage, away from the loose wires and sweaty stage floors. "You don't have a place to stay?" she asked, low voice. He nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Not tonight," she said, firm, "but by tonight you will. I've already reached out. A friend works in a foundation that helps kids with real talent, kids no one thought had the right to shine. You're not just a street kid. You're fire, and we're not letting you burn out." Elias blinked, startled by kindness he'd never counted on. And guess who walked up behind them? The guard, the same one who nearly chased him off with his eyes earlier. This time, he reached out his hand awkwardly. I, I'm sorry," the guard said, voice quiet. "I mean, I just expected, you know, people like you to stay outside the doors, but you proved I was wrong." Man, the irony was thick enough to swallow. The gatekeeper learning humility from the very thing he tried to block. At that moment, it felt like something broke loose. Not just on that stage, but deep in the walls of that theater, and in the hearts of everyone who watched. A challenge put out to the world. You can't keep locking doors on people with truth in their voice. This is the turning point, the catharsis of our story. What will come next? Stay tuned, because Elias has rewritten the script on their rules, and this is just the beginning. Sometimes change doesn't arrive waving a flag or marching to the beat of drums. Sometimes it starts with one note, clear, defiant, and impossible to ignore. If you thought the first two parts of this story gave you the whole picture, sit tight, because what comes next doesn't just shift the story, it flips the script entirely. Elias woke up early, and not to the chill of park benches or the rumble of buses rolling by, but in an actual bed, a real bed, mattress soft enough to cradle the weight he carried, clean white sheets, a curtain swaying in a breeze that smelled of morning, not exhaust. It was just a small room in a shelter, but this time there was a nameplate taped to the door, his name, Elias. It felt suspicious, almost like a setup, like the world was suddenly playing fair, and he didn't trust it. After all, every time he'd been handed a little light, someone came right behind to flip the switch off. "Sorry, kid, this world wasn't built for you. System's already full." But this time, the system glitched. The day after the audition, his name was in headlines. Voice from the streets breaks through the theater wall. The boy they tried to erase just redefined the stage. It wasn't just BET or the neighborhood blog. It was CNN, the Times. Even those papers that usually ran stories under banners like Crime Watch or Youth in Trouble were now quoting his lyrics. Funny, isn't it? They only call you inspiring after they tried to silence you, after you break through in ways they can no longer deny. And what's wilder, Elias hadn't changed a thing. Same kid, same shoes with holes, same truth in his chest. But suddenly they decided he was worthy of being heard. But Elias wasn't about to play the grateful, quiet success story. He didn't soften his edges for the cameras, didn't practice humility for white comfort. Nah, he walked straight into the spotlight and spoke the words the world needed but didn't want to hear. I'm not special. I'm not the exception. I'm just one of the voices you've ignored until it became convenient to listen. On the third day, a major music agency called, the kind with rooftop studios, marble lobbies, and glass walls where interns hustle like ants. The man on the phone was excited, talked about contracts, tours, album launches, streaming deals. Then came the line. Of course, we'd tweak a few things, clean up the image, fresh look, a stylist, maybe even a stage name, something more universal. Universal. You want me to be more palatable, Elias said flat. Just branding, the man chuckled nervously. You know how this business works. Click. No hesitation. No thank you. No, I'll think about it. Elias wasn't here to be cleaned up for their comfort. He came in this world as the boy who wasn't on the list, and he'd stay exactly that. No polish, no filter. They could either take it as it is or choke on it. A week later, he was back at the Welton Theater, but this time not as an uninvited voice crashing the scene. This time, his name was on the program. Featured guest, headliner. Those same massive doors that nearly slammed in his face now opened wide. The same security guard who once eyed him like trouble now greeted him with special guest scribbled awkwardly beside his name in the logbook. But one face was missing, the administrator. On leave for personal reasons, said the official note. Unofficially, he'd been fired. Public discrimination, mishandling of a viral moment, bad optics. But Elias didn't celebrate. He didn't clap back or dance in the ruins. No victory lap. He just walked past the very stage they'd once tried to erase him from, looked out over the seats and thought, sometimes, to make them hear you, you got to become the thing they fear the most. Truth without apology. That night the theater was packed. Not for the spectacle, not for the lights or the choreography. They came for him, the kid who didn't bend, the kid who said no thanks to being cleaned up for the cameras. He sang the same song, but this time it wasn't a plea. It was a battle cry, a warning, a declaration. In the crowd, the woman with the dreads nodding, journalists with pens hovering, and a boy in the front row, maybe 10, turned to his father and whispered, "He's just like me." After the show, a man approached, tall, balding, cheap suit, eyes down. "I was one of the judges," he said, voice barely audible. "The first day, I was the one who cut you off." He swallowed. "I saw everything afterward. I heard it. I get it now. I'm sorry." Elias didn't speak right away, just looked at him. Not angry, just measured. "You weren't the only one who saw," he said finally. "You were just one of the ones who stayed silent. So don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself." The man nodded, shrunk back into the crowd. But that wasn't the end. A month later, in his old neighborhood, the one with broken windows and forgotten street names, a new studio opened. It wasn't fancy. No gold records on the wall, just hand-me-down microphones, donated speakers, and a sign scrawled on cardboard. "You got a voice? Come sing." Elias was the first through the door. "I'm not a teacher," he told the volunteers, "but I can show them what it sounds like to be free." And the kids came, in mismatched shoes, with notebooks full of rhymes. Some didn't even speak much, but their eyes said it all. They carried the same weight Elias once did. In the evenings, he'd sit on the shelter rooftop, feet dangling off the edge, city noise below like a heartbeat that never stopped. And he'd think, all this started with $3, my last three, and a song. If he had to sing again tomorrow, he would. Not for fame, not for applause, but for every kid who wasn't on the list. Because when a black boy, no home, no coach, no backup plan, stands on a stage and sings so true that even the gatekeepers cry, that's not a performance, that's a revolution. And it doesn't matter whether his name was on the program, because now his name is in the memory of everyone who heard. And if this story moved you, don't stay silent, because the world only changes when someone from the street decides they're done asking for permission to speak.